Well, hello and welcome to episode 52 of It's Never Sunny in Seattle, a Seattle Mariners podcast. I'm your host today, Evan James, joined by Michael Ahedo and Andrés Jorstad. The Mariners have won 12 in a row and are red hot, and they're going for number 13 tonight in Game 3 against the Texas Rangers. Theoretically, they could close out this half of the break on a 14-game winning streak, and they're back in it, and it's really exciting for all of us. Obviously, Julio hit the grand slam last night, so we're all kind of still living in the afterglow of that. But I'm going to kick it over to Durs first because he got a chance to do something that I always wanted to do and haven't done, which is see a Mariners game, and in this case, a 2-game sweep at Nationals Park from an away perspective. So, Durs, how exciting was that?
So it was super exciting for me, particularly because I have not seen before this a Mariners game in person since 2018. Because I spent 2019 in the minors the whole season with Lynchburg, and then 2020, obviously, no fans. And then last year, I actually came over to Seattle one of the 2 weeks that they were on the road the whole week in the middle of June. So I did not get a chance to see them. So it was really exciting for me, mostly just because I hadn't realized how long it had been before, since I'd seen them. And I think I took for granted the ability to see them in person. So if you live in Seattle and you get to, see the Mariners, that's a super special experience. And it was just it really hit me how much I missed being able to do that. Fellow Lookout Landing writer Zach Mason was there with me, as well as my girlfriend. And I turned to Zach at one point and I was like, man, it's so weird. I'm just looking down at the field and Paul Sewald is literally right there. That's so weird. It was a big high brain moment, I suppose, where I was just like, man, isn't it so weird that you can see them actually there? But it was super cool. The first game rained out, which was a bummer, so we had a doubleheader the second day. But it was also the first time I'd ever seen a doubleheader in person because they don't do doubleheaders in Seattle unless they're scheduled. So it was really neat to just spend the whole day at the ballpark, see an early game, get some food, and then see another game. It was really wild. But the energy was super pro Mariners. There was, especially the second game, it was half Mariners fans in the ballpark, it felt like. I just saw so many fans in the concourse that were wearing Mariners stuff. Maybe it's just because they only come to DC every 5 years, and DC is a big transplant city, so it's not too far-fetched to move from Seattle to DC. And I think that Mariners fans would be more likely to take off work in the middle of the week to go see a doubleheader than a Nationals fan would be, because they'd just be oh, I'll just go see them this weekend. Also, the Nationals stink. Currently the worst record in baseball after that sweep, so that might be another reason why nobody goes to those games. The second game was super empty. There maybe was 5,000 people at first pitch. Maybe. It was really bad. But yeah, it was super cool because it was just I was sitting in a Mariners friendly section for that second game, and everyone was super excited for the Mariners, and you could just feel the energy. And I don't know if it would have been different if the Mariners weren't playing well, if they were just playing how they had been a month ago. But it seemed like the team was just the vibes were in fact very good. The team was just very good spirits, joking around, having a great time. It just seemed like they all just loved being on the field, which maybe you should be yeah, they're playing baseball, but it just seemed different. They were joking with each other. JP and Eugenio were dancing to other players' walk-up music, which was really funny, I thought. Especially in the 1-run game at the bottom of the ninth, they were just chilling, having a good old time. So I think I really grew an appreciation for JP and Eugenio in particular, because they just were having a good time on the field, and I love that stuff.
I'm going to ask you a Nationals question and segue it into the Mariners. So Juan Soto apparently turned down a 15-year, $440 million contract recently. The Mariners also have a budding young superstar, and I wanted to ask both of you guys, let's say the Mariners were to go into this offseason looking to extend Julio. Just give me a ballpark figure kind of in years and dollars of what you'd be looking to invest in him. Mikey first.
I mean... Yeah, go ahead,
Why?
Mikey.
Ballpark? I would give him a lot. If they gave him that Tatis contract, I think I'd be happy. Which I think they probably wouldn't do because I don't remember how many years of ARB they bought out Tatis. But Julio has 3 years of team control and 3 years of ARB, which is a lot of years. So it's kind of hard to say. I don't really know what it looks like, but just like in general, I would easily give him that Tatis contract, 14 years, 340 mil. So that's like 24 million a year, which is sort of higher when you consider that Tatis had some of that team control bought out. So not sure if that helps or not, but
I've sort of convinced myself after our last podcast that the Mariners are saving money for either a giant Julio extension or a run at Shohei Ohtani or both. So I think I would give Julio that Soto contract that he just turned down. Yeah. I don't see why they wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it'll take that with Julio, but
they're, for the record, they're definitely not mutually exclusive. The Mariners have, like, trying to pull it up, the 22nd ranked payroll in baseball. They're at 107 million. And their 26-man payroll is 77 million, which is actually probably the number to look at. So they could literally triple their payroll and be around the Yankees.
Here's my question for you guys, and maybe this is an obvious one. My two favorite players. Would you rather have Soto or Ohtani?
I think Ohtani.
You first, Mikey.
I think Ohtani.
I also would say Ohtani. I think that Soto is a better bet to be worth something close to this kind of like superstar approximate value long term, because you can see Soto shifting into like a Nelson Cruz role long term and potentially playing that extended career. I don't know if I trust Shohei, not necessarily to stay healthy, but to stay elite caliber late into his career, and into like the third act of his career, so to speak. I could see him pitching and hitting and being very good for a long time, but like Soto might legitimately be a top 5 hitter in the league for the next 15 years. But Shohei, that combination of skills is just, I think we almost forget how valuable it is until you actually add it up, because he could potentially have like a 5 WAR season on both sides of the dish and be a 10 WAR player. And that's insane. Like,
I don't think it'll ever happen, for the record.
It probably
this is 80
won't.
grade rosterbation.
It's just they don't make them like that. You know what I mean? Like, they don't make them that way. So
I don't think there's a wrong answer. It's really just how you're constructing your roster, because with them as starting pieces, you construct your roster differently. I will say, in terms of aging, Soto's plate skills will age better. He has maybe the best eye in baseball.
I think the problem is we just don't have any idea how Ohtani will age because there is no precedent.
Correct.
Yeah, if you want to play it safe, Soto's the easy answer. But also, so long as Ohtani hurts the right part of his body, which is basically his UCL, he can still hit. And he's done that.
It's true. I think I mentioned this to you guys off pod, and I know we're a Mariners podcast, but I think it's worth diving into the whole Soto of it all, because I think people are going to be asking. I think that this is going to be a discussion where every fan base is going to say, like, can we acquire Soto? / is it likely? I'm going to say that I think that there would be a very small chance the Mariners would get him, because I don't know if the Mariners really have the pieces to do it. / I don't think Jerry is willing to push in all the chips that he's built up to do that. All the chips that it would take, right? It would take something like Kirby, Kelnick, Marte plus, God, I don't know, Brash or something like that.
It just doesn't make sense.
No, I don't think he would do it. But secondly, I'm going to go on the record and say I don't think Soto gets traded. I think, I mentioned to you guys, the Nationals are expected to sell the team the next year. I think what happens is a new owner comes in and they garner a ton of goodwill in the fan base by just like backing up the Brinks truck for Soto and signing him to a massive extension in like the first few months of the new ownership. That seems super smart. And also I think something that they would do, because basically this is a sign of the Nationals' current ownership being too cheap to sign him, because it's an under 30 million average annual value that they offered him over 15 years. And I don't think there were opt-out clauses, at least not that we know of. I think the contract structure probably looks something like closer to 500 with a few opt-outs, so that Boris and Soto have some leverage to force the Nationals to try to compete while Soto's there. And I think that maybe a newer, more cash flowing ownership group is willing to offer that deal to him. So I think that this is all going to be a big, like, everyone's going to be like, oh my God, like putting together packages on Twitter for Soto, and it's never going to actually happen. Because if it does, it would be like unbelievably big, the package that came back, like something that's kind of unfathomable. I don't even know what it would look like, but
I mean, it's going to start, it has to start with Julio or Kelnick. And right now, Kelnick is not going to be, you know, what the Nationals want to start with. And the Mariners need, you know, a number of prospects to pan out. So it doesn't make sense for either team.
No, and if he does get traded, I kind of wonder if Baltimore isn't a like key player in the sweepstakes, because they have a big farm system with a lot of good pieces at this point, and they're kind of on the brink of pushing things over the edge. And that would be the piece they'd need to compete with the Yankees and Red Sox and Rays and Blue Jays.
He would look so weird in an Orioles jersey.
I think the Mariners don't have the pieces to get him straight up. Mikey, you said it would be Julio or Kelnick. I don't think they do it for less than at least Julio, and realistically, like Julio and Cal and Matt Brash would be kind of like where the floor is, in my opinion. And that's insanity.
I don't think that gets it done. Yeah,
that's insanity from the Mariners' perspective to begin with. So, Jerry doesn't like to make trades where it's a bulk of players for a player or two. He likes to invest more in years of control, but he doesn't like to do 3 for 1. He doesn't like to do 4 for 2. He likes to kind of keep the numbers where they are in terms of personnel and spreading out the value, because if you put all your eggs in that basket and it doesn't work out, well, you know, that's 4 of your draft picks that you traded for one guy. So I don't think Soto is an option for us, realistically.
Someone in the Lookout Landing chat pointed out that, like, if teams were capable of trading draft picks, this would look a lot different, because you could be like, I'm going to trade you 5 years worth of first round picks. And then it's like, okay, like maybe you've got them talking now. But
yeah.
Regardless,
we should.
I've taken us away from the Mariners.
Yeah, we should move past a player we're not going to trade for.
Let's switch over to Robbie Ray, who has been the main character of this podcast all season long. Been kind of the protagonist of the Mariners and very emblematic of the way their season has gone. There are several Mariners who, both on a micro level in terms of individual player performance and at a macro level in terms of how the team has actually been metrically, the team kind of just flipped a switch at some point. You know what I mean? Like, Cal was just good one day. Robbie Ray had a third pitch one day. And one day the Mariners decided they weren't going to lose anymore. And here we are. And it's just, normally you see a dichotomy where there isn't such a clear distinction of like a player was really struggling and then they made a change and they were just better the rest of the way. Usually there's a slower kind of a bell curve type progression to this, but the Mariners really have a bunch of guys who they flipped the switch, which really defies all logic to me. But one of those guys is Robbie Ray. And Mikey, we got a question, which was, you've written about him several times about both the new pitch mix, about kind of the loss of velocity he was experiencing earlier in the year, but some of that velocity has come back. And our viewers are wondering, is that sustainable? Is the velocity going to stick around? And if so, kind of how is that going to impact what we've been seeing? Because the results have been better.
Yeah. I mean, I should pull up a rolling graphs I kind of thing. Like for the past, let's see, 2 games now, he's been sitting 95, which I keep kind of citing as where he was when in the beginning of 2021 when he was pitching like an AL Cy Young pitcher. So for the past 2 games, he's been there. If you bump it up to 3 games, like he's more 94 and a half. I really think 95 is the bar to clear, so to speak. Because once you're there, like we've now reached a point, and for the record, like on the year, last year Ray was at a 25.4 strikeout minus walk percentage. Right now he's at 20.6. That doesn't account for the slower start. He has more tools in his tool bag than he did last year, than he did at the beginning of the year. We now have a pitcher who has a more diverse pitch mix, who throws his sinker more than his fastball, who throws his slider really more than or as much as the sinker. And so he looks a lot different. And the thing is, like, a lot of the time, if you're looking at a pitcher, let's say, and you're comparing pitcher's pitch mix, and you're like, oh, this guy only throws 30% fastballs. Well, it's like, yeah, he also throws 30% sinkers, which is kind of the case for Ray. But Ray uses his 2 fastballs really differently, whereas that's not always the case for pitchers. He has been really using the sinker to play off of the fastball, to play off the arm side and off of the plate. And I think if he's getting that fastball back, you get that weapon back that you're able to just, for the most part, it's just, here's my fastball, like, hit it. Like, I dare you to hit it. That's what it was last year. And more than ever, hitters have to also gear up for the slider, and also have to keep the sinker in the back of their minds, because the fastball he throws glove side at the top of the zone. The sinker he throws a little lower and arm side. So I think he's more predictable than he's ever been as an effective pitcher. So I want to see another game of him throwing 95 before I feel more confident in it. But overall, man, he's looking pretty good. I don't know, did I answer the question there?
I would say you did. Yeah, very much so.
Cool.
I just want to say that this is super encouraging from the Mariners side, because we were talking for a while about, like, if Ray looks like this in year 1, what's he going to look like in years 4 and 5? So it's super encouraging to see the Mariners, like, take a guy, like, find a fix relatively quickly, and get him back to where he was when they signed him, basically. Especially for pitching. And I think we knew that they have the ability to do this with pitching, and maybe I'm taking this away from pitching for a second, but it seems like they maybe have done that with Jesse Winker too. I know, Mikey, you were talking about Winker on Twitter and the changes that he's made.
So Winker was suspended for 5 or 6 games, and that gave him some time to, really clear his head and work on some things, which I think was actually probably really necessary. I think he was already starting to heat up a little more, but he's got a newer stance, where I think a lot of people, players just have kind of a look, and I think Winker's previous setup, which is one that he's had for a while now, made people uncomfortable, because it doesn't look like someone who hits like he does, where he's holding the bat very, very vertically, very relaxed. And now I've seen people compare his newer stance to Dustin Ackley, which I think is stupid. But he's opened it up a little bit. He's remained really upright, but now his bat is in a completely different position where it's more parallel to the ground as opposed to perpendicular. We have seen this season that in terms of approach, in terms of pitch selection, in terms of walks, he's done all that. He just hasn't made hard contact, which is something he's done for the past 2 years or maybe more. Dipoto, I think, mentioned that his swing looks a lot easier, and I think his timing looks a lot easier. I admit I'd have to go back and kind of compare the two, but I think his timing mechanism is a little different in terms of his step. It's almost reminds me of like Bryce Harper, where it's like you kind of step in and towards your back foot and then you step back out. That's what we saw with the home run the other day, and I think it does look a lot more easy. So I think a lot of what's happening here is adjusting his hands and adjusting his swing path, because his swing path I think was off. And no hitter, you can't take the same mechanics and apply them to every hitter. And I think he's finding what's working for him now. But I really think it has to do with his hands and how they're firing to the ball and how the path that they're taking to the ball, that path. And so I am really I'm really encouraged, more than anything, more than anyone, aside from maybe Ray, really encouraged that he's turning it around, and if he does, he's probably the Mariners' best hitter against right-handed pitching, maybe Julio. So they're I don't remember the record since Winker fought the entire Angels bench, but to get him back after they've been this good, like they won 12 straight, I think is going to be a huge boon and should help them continue this momentum.
Yeah, Frazier too has also looked a little bit different, and Dipoto said on, I think it was 710 this last week, that they are trusting Frazier to make the adjustments at this point, which maybe we don't like. I certainly am not sure how I feel about that, because that sounds to me like we're not gonna. I mean, maybe it's just like leverage talk, like they don't want to sound desperate for a second baseman in the public, so that because otherwise the Reds could be like, oh, give us like someone better for Drury because you obviously need someone. But I think there might be some truth to it, especially because of how Frazier has played since that comment, where he had a very good Washington series. He had, what did he pinch hit in the first game against Texas, and he had a single, and then he was pretty decent yesterday. Like, it seems like he's maybe starting to turn things around. So, small sample, but if they can get him back to at least just being a contact heavy guy, I think that maybe he's fine. I don't know.
He's never, aside from 2020, which as far as I'm concerned doesn't count as a season. When I look at player performance, he's never had a season below league average. He's always been like a league average hitter, and he flirted with looking a lot better than that last year. We saw in the beginning of this year, for the first, I don't know, 1 or a month and a half probably, he was a really good hitter. And I think he is more susceptible than anyone in terms of he's the Mariners archetype for a player in terms of controlling the zone. He doesn't he walks a fair amount, he doesn't strike out, he puts a lot of balls in plays. If your swing's messed up, you're going to put a lot of balls in play and you're going to fare pretty poorly, which he did. I think it's going to be pretty easy for him to turn it around, because once those, ground balls or pop-ups start to turn into those burners that you're just flipping into left field, you're not going to be Ty France, but you're going to get towards that average to above average hitter. So I it's hard to watch when he's struggling, but there's really no precedent for Adam Frazier not being a good hitter.
He's kind of doing the poor man's Ben Zobrist thing right now for Seattle because they've been playing him all over the place. They've been playing him at second and right field and left field, I think, and they even had him play a couple innings at shortstop. Yeah, either yesterday or the day before. Yeah,
filling in for JP.
Yikes.
Yeah.
For the record, a poor man's Ben Zobrist is just called a utility player.
This is true.
Well, I don't know if that's really fair. That's like a really poor man's Ben Zobrist. What I'm saying is like I think that Ben Zobrist is like what everyone wants, which is like a 5-WAR utility player. But if Frazier could be like a 3-WAR utility player, I think that's better than most utility players.
Which he was last year.
Yeah.
More than that. So yeah, if we Seattle Mariners league average hitting the rest of the way through, and his defense and ability to move around, I really think like the answer, or one of the answers, really the answer, is to move him around, is to get Toro down to AAA, because like I was talking to one of our listeners, I think last week, and he's like, "Bro, you hate Toro," and I was like, "No, I don't. I adore Toro." And I've written really positive articles about him. He has a 61 WRC plus right now.
Right.
He's another guy that puts a lot of balls into play, and until I wrote about, he's just hitting too many fly balls the other way that they just drag. They're not going to turn into base hits. So until he gets that turned around, he's just not going to be good. So there is value in
like. Sorry, go ahead.
There's value in being able to move around, a player, but it's harder when he's hitting 39% below league average. Like he's hitting like a utility player or worse.
Is there something vaguely Ketel Marte-ish about Abraham Toro? Like, almost I feel like he's like a swing adjustment away from becoming like that type of hitter. Because Marte was very similar, where he had pretty good plate skills, had decent but not overwhelming contact ability, and then he just like took it to another level by unlocking a power stroke. And that's what made him what he is now.
Marte's always run a higher average and had better bat to ball skills, in my opinion, than Toro does. Toro's closer to like a Dylan Moore almost than a Ketel Marte, because he's not going to run a 260 average.
I will say that I agree that is probably how the Mariners view him. I think that's why, he's hung around. He hasn't flashed so first of all, he's just not the athlete that Marte is. He hasn't flashed the raw power though. Whereas Marte, he
I mean, do we forget the first like month or two that he was in Seattle? Because he definitely flashed the power then.
He flashed the home runs, but he didn't flash the exit velo. Like his max exit velo, like career, is like 109, which isn't that hard. Like it's much harder than I can hit. But in terms of like the league average max exit velo, I'm trying to remember what it is. 106, 107. Like it's harder than that, but it's not like impressive, I would say. Once you get past 110 to like 111, 112, it's like, oh, you can really hit the ball hard. But like for the most part, he hits a lot of high fly balls. And with this ball, whatever fucking ball this is, because some different articles, it's just different every time. I think it's just really inconsistent. It's not gonna work as well as it might have before. I will say he's pulling the ball more than ever. I like that. That's one thing that I said he ought to do, and apparently it's not it's not fixing him. He's just getting under too many balls, like worse than last year even.
in terms of the Mariners offense, I think Toro is obviously one of the big question marks right now, and Frazier and Winker have both looked better. We got Ty France back this week, and there's been some speculation that he may or may not be hurt. I'm wondering, having watched him, he seems to be okay to me. What's your guys' kind of read on how he's looked at the plate? He mentioned that his timing might be a little bit off, but he's really critical for the Mariners moving forward. Obviously, he's our best hitter. Durs, do you think he's fully healthy and ready to go, or did the Mariners maybe push this a little bit?
I think he's healthy, but I think he's healthy enough, right? I mean, there's a history of this because the Mariners did this almost exactly last year, where he had an injury. I think it was the wrist, and he took some time, but not really enough. And then he wasn't like the same hitter for most of the time after that. And I think France is one of those guys where the Mariners feel pretty pressured to get him out there because they know he's their best guy at that position and they want all their best guys out there. And France is never going to say no to playing. But I bet we find out later this year, like calendar year, that he was hurt and he was just playing through it. And that he's like, oh, I'm going to undergo some surgery of some sort to get this totally fixed. Or I'm going to rehab it for X amount of time and be ready for spring training. Like, I feel like we're going to get something like that. So that's to say, I think France will be fine in that you probably won't notice him being like demonstrably worse. But when you look at the overall stat line, it's probably not going to be like what we were getting, which was like borderline elite Ty France. I think it's going to be, I think you have to take your expectations down a little bit with the assumption that he's currently playing injured.
And the Mariners might be getting a boost to the offense shortly in that they are expecting Mitch Haniger back at some point, although we were looking this up before the podcast, and he apparently is just running so far, just doing sprints every couple days. No baseball activity yet. However, Kyle Lewis has been hitting home runs every day in rehab and giving me life and hope. Obviously, I think his role with the team is going to be a little peculiar when he gets back, although he has played so far in 3 games in Tacoma. He's played left field twice and DH once. I think that that's probably some kind of the mix you're going to see when he's back on the team. He might back up center field for Julio once in a while. He might play left field and right field, but he's going to do kind of an even mix between DH and the outfield. But we need that because we're playing Frazier in the outfield with regularity. We are playing Upton in the outfield, which was never the plan. That was not supposed to be the case. He was supposed to be a veteran DH presence, and he has been an outfield mainstay. So we are way beyond the pale in that situation. I'm really excited to get Kyle Lewis back. I wanted to ask both you guys this. We have a really interesting prospect in AAA. You know, when you're looking at the Tacoma roster, there's really only, besides Kyle Lewis, I guess, one interesting player on the whole team. He's pretty interesting though. He's a 22-year-old, really young prospect who's got some major league
Joe
experience
Odom.
under his belt. Yeah, Joe Odom, exactly. But obviously we're referring to Jared Kelnick, who was the AAA player of the week last week and went 3 for 4 last night. This might have been 2 nights ago. But he's been playing much better. There's been some small sample size, but real evidence that he's been hitting off-speed stuff better. I guess my question to you guys is, what does his role look like with the team? Okay, so let's assume we do get Mitch back. You know, like, be it August or the end of this month or whenever. Let's assume that Mitch Haniger does exist and is technically healthy enough to play the outfield. Where does Jared sit on the hierarchy? Like, because we're going to get Trammell back, we're going to get Kyle Lewis back, we're going to get Mitch Haniger back. We have Jesse Winker hitting again. Is there room for Jared right now?
I don't know who there's room. It's gonna be, there's gonna be so much juggling because first base is Santana and France, and the outfield is Winker and Kelnick and Haniger and Lewis. As far as I'm concerned, Trammell isn't really an issue here. It's more, I think what we're going to see is just guys get more days off, which I think is going to be good. It might be a good excuse to get Ty France an IL stint if that's what he needs. more matchups, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know if you can really say it like a hierarchy. Like it's pretty much Julio should play every day. Winker should play every day against right-handers. And Lewis and Haniger should get plenty of rest. So Kelnick fits somewhere into there. I think it'll be easier to juggle all this than it feels, just because of how kind of how injuries work, how guys are hitting, like things will just kind of shake out. And in general, this is a great problem to have. I almost don't even know if I would call it a problem. But we should also name that I had a bit of a conversation about this on Twitter about Kelnick's, ability to hit breaking balls. And Tieran, I think, posted a graph from Brooks Baseball about Kelnick really every month swinging and missing less at non-fastballs. That's really encouraging, but there's also that I don't know what it means to I guess to fix these problems at AAA, because these aren't major league breaking balls. And Jared Seidler of BP was essentially saying he's still swinging and missing too much. A lot of this is just because he's not swinging at the pitches. Like the problem is still inherent, which is a huge issue. But if he can hit fastballs and he can lay off breaking stuff, that might work. I mean, hitting's just not cookie cutter. So I guess all that is to say, I am still worried about him. I do not think he's fixed per se. I think they probably need to see. He's not up till August. I bet he comes up in September.
I don't think the Mariners call him up unless they have full-time ABs for him.
Yeah. I would say unless they have, I don't know about full-time, but like unless he's playing most days. But also if it's only like a month, could be worse. And like this is a team that needs to win, and if he helps them win, I think they do that. If he's playing 80% of games or something like that. Because their playoff odds are 57% right now, according to Fangraphs. So it depends. It always depends.
You mentioned something interesting, which is the Ty France injury list stint is also kind of an interesting option, because then you can move Winker to first base and keep him out of the outfield, and you want his bat, but not necessarily his glove. So that's a spot for Jared, theoretically. But go ahead, Ners.
Oh, I was just going to say, Julio also swings and misses a lot. The difference is that Julio is really good at hunting his pitch. And that's something that Jared was struggling with when he was up this year, was that he was swinging straight through fastballs through the middle of the plate. Like Julio gets fooled by breaking stuff a lot. So obviously that's something he and Jared have in common. But yeah, if Jared can learn to basically do the Julio, I mean, everyone wants to do that. But like more specifically, if you're going to swing and miss at all the breaking balls, you have to be able to hit the the stuff that's right down the middle of the plate, or the stuff that the mistake pitches, basically.
Just do the Julio.
And he wasn't doing that. Yeah, just do what Julio does. But yeah, he needs to become a guy where if you have a big deficiency like that, you have to be really good at the other thing. So I think that's my main concern is I was just very frustrated watching him just like totally either watch pitches that were very hittable or swing through pitches that were very hittable. So if he can button that up, I think I'm more optimistic about him.
I think it's again a swing path thing. Julio doesn't get under the ball, and like the flaw there is like, yeah, he doesn't get under the ball because he's hitting over the ball, like he's hitting a lot of ground balls, but like not exceedingly so. Like in terms of ground ball percentage, it's only a couple, above average. He just consistently hits the ball hard. And most of that, is hunting fastballs, but Julio can also hit off speed enough to where, if you look at like league average on the whole, it's lower this year, But like a league average xWOBA is like 315, 316. It's probably 308 or something this year. Like his xWOBA against breaking and off speed, they're probably average out to be 298 or something. That's not that far below league average. So Kelnick doesn't. I mean, he was punishing fastballs, but he was absolute dog shit against non-fastballs. Like let's say 115 xWOBA. That's really fucking bad. And so yeah, Julio does whiff a lot against non-fastballs, and actually whiffs more against fastballs than Kelnick, but he punishes them all. And I think he's able to kind of tighten it up in 2 strike counts and not strike out, whereas Kelnick, not the case. So yeah, I don't know. I just want to say that.
I want to switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about pitching because we have a couple of questions. Meow Mix was wondering, how will the pitching staff fare in the second half? I think this ties into comments we've had about George Kirby, potentially the inning limits, which it doesn't seem like is actually going to be the case, although they've already started kind of reducing his role in the interim so they can skip starts here and there. My understanding is they only need to really skip about 7 starts for him over the course of the year, and they're going to come out of the All-Star break, given the way this is shaken out, having skipped 4 back-to-back-to-back. So that's only 3 that they need to kind of juggle their way around for the rest of the year. That's not very much. So I think that that's very doable. But I wanted to tie this into also looking for a starting pitcher on the trade market, if there's anybody you guys are really interested in. And obviously, Ners posted the question from his friend, which is, would you trade Kyle Lewis for Blake Snell? So Blake Snell, obviously, in part of the larger picture, is one of those names the Mariners could potentially look to add to the rotation.
I mean, no. Yeah, right? Like, I just...
No?
Snell, when he fixed himself, he got, he was getting back in the zone. He stopped walking guys. This is now a year and a half of those same problems arising. And he does strike a lot of guys out, but I definitely don't think he's an ace. And while I think he is valuable, I would just rather have a good hitter and potentially good fielder in Kyle Lewis, because the Mariners' strength has been, well, yeah, it's been their starting pitching. And I think that they need to add, but they also need to hit.
Yeah, that's the thing, is you take the bat over the arm in this situation.
Right. So
I know, Mikey, you have one pitcher at least I know that you really like, pitches for a Cincinnati ball club.
Malley, yeah.
I
would love him. And it's actually kind of interesting because I might comp him to. He's pretty Kirby-esque. He's got the better fastball. I think what I would say is right now, and he actually has walked a fair amount of guys, but in terms of just command, he's like Kirby with a better fastball. Just like it actually has good fastball shape, whereas Kirby's is like dead zone, like really not good, like bad. So you think they trade him? I do. I think you asked me the other day.
I asked you to trade who?
If Cincinnati would trade Malley. Maybe it wasn't you.
No,
but whoever asked me, I said,
but...
oh, I think they do. Okay. you know who the Mariners could trade for? Are you all ready?
Is it Tyler Anderson?
Merrill Kelly.
Oh. That's like a total, like, because Jerry even said he wants a guy who could maybe even be a swingman, and that's like, I don't know, that feels like right in the wheelhouse.
Listen, fellas, he's really ticked it up this year with a better changeup. I know it's not sexy, and Jerry did say, like, we're not afraid to make an impact, trade in terms of a a starter, and I don't think that's like we are going to trade for Shane Bieber or Kyle Wright. I don't fucking know. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like, I'm just looking at a leaderboard of top starters by WAR, and like Merrill Kelly's top 20. That's equal to Malley, better than Garrett Cole and Frankie Montas, so, and Tyler Anderson. So like, I need to check. Maybe he's kind of cooled off after his hot start, but he tweaked the changeup and added some depth to it. I think started throwing it more. I like Merrill Kelly, but if you want someone, because the Mariners have a bunch of guys who just don't strike guys out per se. Like they have Marco and they have Flexen. Merrill Kelly is not going to make that better.
How would you feel about one JT Brubaker?
I would not feel about JT Brubaker.
That feels like a very Jerry acquisition, though. Like
it really does.
He's ARB eligible next year. He shouldn't be super expensive because he's not like amazing, and it's from the Pirates, who are definitely going to be willing to trade him. But he's been like solid. Like he's running a 4.02 ERA, a 3.81 xERA, a 3.73 FIP. Like all the numbers are like solidly, a little bit better than average. Innings eater, more than a K per nine, or more than a K per inning. Limits home runs well, at least this year. Although that may be in for normalization, but I don't know. It just feels like a very like decent back of the rotation guy to fill in.
I wouldn't hate it. I'm kind of looking over his stuff right now. He commands the ball really well. Both of his fastballs kind of suck, but he commands his sinker well. And both his slider and curveball are like, they play up. Like they're average-ish pitches, I would call them, but they play up because of how well he locates them. So that might be good too. I could get with that. He's had a home run problem in the past, but he hasn't this year. So yeah, just in terms of of acquirees, I think you want to target a guy that, and maybe this is controversial, but maybe you want to target a guy that isn't necessarily pitching all that well. Like he's been all right, and make a tweak. And I think if you do that with JT Brubaker, you're probably, and I'm pulling up a CSW right now, but you're probably having him throw his slider more and his curveball more. Yeah, like his slider has his sinker CSW is solid. It's like 28%, 29% basically. His slider CSW is 33.7. His curveball CSW is 39. I would call the curveball, kind of a get me over pitch, but like a good one. So if you have him throw more get me over curves, throw more sliders, I think the sinker plays up. The four seamer just kind of sucks, but that's the kind of thing that you can do where these guys are they perform better with a different team. I'm into it.
And hey, if the Mariners need kind of a change of pace guy to switch it up with Marco and with Flexen and the other soft tossers, and maybe a guy who can go some length and has high velocity, they have called up Matt Brash. So I think his usage is still to be determined, and they're probably not going to use him as a long reliever or like a swing man as we would maybe like. But who's to say he can't be a meaningful piece here?
For the record,
this is my thing. Oh, go ahead.
You go. No.
I was gonna say, this is my thing. Like, if you acquire, because he says he wants a swingman type, you can acquire a guy and then make like Flexen your swingman. You can push him out of the rotation full time, and I think that there's going to be enough opportunities for a sixth starter, because we have, like, knock on wood, but have had very lucky and had a lot of luck rather in terms of injuries and lack thereof in the rotation. And you just know one is going to come in the second half. So you have to just kind of account for that spot being there. And if it's not, and if everyone's healthy, then great. And you kind of get to rotate guys in and out, give some guys some rest, especially Kirby. If you're going to, play with his innings, if you're going to play with Gilbert's innings a little bit, like there's the opportunity to do that and fit in another starter. But go on. What were you going to say, Mikey?
Well, first of all, I think you should push Marco and Flexen out of the rotation. It's kind of interesting. I think arguably Flexen has been worse. I mean, they've been pretty much equal, but you have the ability to piggyback guys. You have the ability to move Kirby to the bullpen and pitch him, and just deeper. Like that actually is kind of an asset, and it is an asset to be able to pitch a guy, 3 innings at a time, and then you also have Brash who can theoretically go multiple innings. So I think the Mariners have a lot of flexibility here, and I think Marco would be pissed if he got moved to the bullpen, but you need to pitch better, bro. So I think there's a lot more, flexibility here than it seems. Like, really, the only locks to me are Gilbert and Ray, and I guess Marco, just because he's never mind. So yeah, I think there's a lot that you could have different things that you can do. And while y'all talk, I'm just gonna go through different teams and look at bad teams with good pitchers.
Take a gander at the Marlins.
Honestly,
I apologize. I gotta move us along because I'm running out of time very quickly here. But we're gonna do one last question, then wrap it up for today. We had a question from Zach Gabal, I believe how you say that. He wanted to know, has Munoz secretly taken over as the highest leverage reliever on the Mariners? That's an interesting question. I think the short answer that I would give to that is I think Castillo and Sewald are still getting the most high leverage innings, but Munoz has very steadily crept his way up into discussion with those other two. Would you agree with that?
I think that it seems like Munoz has kind of taken over the Steckenrider leverage, which is
the Steckenroll.
Yeah. It's good because he's better than Steckenrider. Steckenrider, who has thrown 5 very uninspiring appearances in Tacoma thus far. I don't know if they're ever going to be able to fix him. But Munoz, I think, is maybe the most I'm sorry, Mikey, maybe the most talented reliever on the team. But
messed up, man. Messed up.
That's no slant. I mean, there's a lot of options. That's a good problem to have. I think I've mentioned this before, but I don't think I don't think Service likes having a quote unquote closer. I think he likes the situational aspect of it and being able to throw a different guy depending on, what you're looking for / whoever's available. Because right now they essentially have 4 firemen, right? It's 4 guys that you pull in high leverage situations, which is Castillo, Munoz, Sewald, and Swanson. So I think that's a fine arrangement. I don't really know if they're interested in changing it. I think that we're still going to continue to see Munoz sometimes in the 7th, sometimes in the 8th, sometimes in the 9th. And he's really good. So that's really cool.
I mean, I think objectively, no. Because when I look at pitch leverage, I mean, Diego Castillo is getting the bulk of those, or I guess just overall on average has the highest pitch leverage, which probably has to do with pitching in the 9th a lot. It's still kind of strange because I think part of it is because Sewald gets the 2, 3, 4 kind of the heart of the order. But in the past month, Munoz is 3rd. So I would say no. Even recently, I think when I look at he's not getting the ninth inning a ton. He's getting the eighth inning, and it's hard to know without remembering like what those situations were looking like. But yeah, just in terms of win probability added divided by pitch leverage. So really just looking at like in a vacuum, how much like contextless, how much are these players adding to the team. Munoz has been a little better than Seawald in the past month or so, which isn't much of a sample. Well, yeah, but it's been very good. So I think he's moving into it.
It's very exciting. I'm going to cut us off there for today. I'm actually out of time. I got to leave in about 10 minutes. I'm Evan. You can find me on Twitter at Evan James Audio. You can find Mikey on Twitter at _Kuya Mikey. You can find Anders on Twitter at Andrés Jorstad. You can find the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever else you get your podcasts, wherever it is you stream. Please support the podcast on Patreon by going to patreon.com/NeverSunnyInSeattle. Additionally, I will put the Discord link in the description for the video on YouTube, on Anchor, wherever it is. Thank you for listening. Go Mariners, and going for a baker's dozen tonight. Pretty exciting. So, yeah.